Yo, John Bush here in the creek bed with a little walk and talk. Although I don't know how much I'll walk a little. I'm going to talk to you about this movement that we see springing up in the U.S. and other parts of the West as well, that can be embodied by Trumpian populism, Musk, free speech, platitudes, RFK Jr., Tucker Carlson, very much anti-establishment, although it has some elements of co-opting. So I want to talk about that and contrast that with the whole deep state leftist movement and some of the risks and some of the things I see playing out. Deep state, Kamala, Obama, Clinton. Kamala's really just a puppet. Intelligence agencies connected in with some Chinese Communist Party aspects, pushing hard for censorship and weird woke leftist stuff. That's the other side of the aisle. So I try not to do left and right, because ultimately it's like the spectrum is freedom and tyranny, or freedom and control. But there's these two political movements, seemingly rivaled, but they have a lot to do with each other. Anyway, I wanted to share this because I got into a conversation with old Derek Bros and other people on X, and it had to do with this video that was shared of Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's doing this big tour, and Russell Brand was there at the first stop. I don't know how many people are in the audience, 1,000 plus. I don't know the exact number, but I know homeboy turns out gigantic crowds. And so I watched this video, at least most of this, the first 30-minute monologue that Tucker did, and then a chunk of the Brand interview, and I was inspired by it. Tucker, in the beginning, just riffs on some of classic Americana traditional values, which, I'm all about free expression. People show up in the world how they want to show up, whatever. People got sexuality that's different than man, woman, unit, family unit, then by all means. But I do see also the value and the strength in a culture that is rooted in these traditional values of marriage, raising children, not being all crazy and debauch, not involve yourself in debauchery and stuff. So he talked a whole lot about that, and then he had this really great bit where he shifted into how people focus so much energy on evil and darkness, when let us not lose sight of all the good and the wonder and beauty in the world. And that's a message that I often convey. And so there was that, and then Brand came on and had a similar positive message, and prayed at the end, asked for unity during the election. Didn't pray for Trump to get elected, but prayed for unity and forgiveness and grace for the American public and for all over the world. Anyway, and there's a lot of cynicism that I see on Twitter and X about this movement, this coalescing, the Musk, RFK Jr., all these key figures, Russell Brand, Andrew Tate. I see a lot of cynicism come from David Icke, somebody who I respect, who's been in the game for a long, long time. But so here's what I want to share. I do believe, the other day I had this realization after watching an RFK Jr. interview on Fox News about this whole Maha thing. Now that he's endorsed Trump, it seems like he might be vying, or maybe the agreement was that he would be the head of the Health and Human Services bureaucracy, which oversees the FDA and the CDC and all that stuff. And he was on Fox just dropping haymakers about processed foods and seed oils. And of course, it's like, well, what should we do? And he's like, well, if I was in office, I would immediately do an executive order for this, that, and the other, going back to politics. But for the bulk of the interview, it was just really solid talking points about why we should avoid this nonsense in our diet. And he's been even when he's stumping for Trump, he's pushing some solid messages. Now, mind you, not running off to vote, and I think Bobby Kennedy's great on the COVID stuff and a handful of other things. He's done so much good work in his world, pushing back on genuine environmental problems. But then he's like captured by Israel, and clearly a political opportunist. But nonetheless, after I watched that video, I had this realization, because there's a lot of folks that are correctly pointing out that there's elements of this new resurging freedom movement, Americana movement, not our style of freedom of like anarchism and voluntarism, but greater freedom, Bill of Rights, Constitution, Christianity. And there's a lot of negativity and a lot of people focusing so much on how there's like co-opting going on, and how J.D. Vance, for example, was his political career was largely funded, and his financial fund that he was involved with was largely propped up by Peter Thiel and this whole conglomeration of you know, PayPal mafia types, who on the same token with them, they've done some good, pushed some good innovations, invested in companies and crypto type stuff, but then they're also clearly building out this surveillance panopticon society in bed with the military-industrial complex, providing all sorts of intelligence technology to Israel, for example. So a lot of people are focusing on that, but after the RFK Jr. interview, I came to realize that this movement that has spurred, that is like a mainstream alternative movement, just like the mainstream alternative media term that I guess David Icke coined. It's in many ways, it's a reflection of where the body politic is at, where American and much of the West, where the consciousness is shifting. The Overton window has shifted, right? In large part as a pendulum swings. That's what happens with cultures and with politics. It swings from left to right. It swings from hardcore communism to capitalism, right? But all the while, let it not be misunderstood that the technocracy and the predator class, the New World Order, they continue to advance the ball down the field regardless of what happens. And in many ways, they leverage movements in order to advance their agenda. Case in point, Wall Street and a lot of these secret society types funded the Bolshevik Revolution, also funded the rise of Hitler. These are seemingly capitalists, right? But a lot of this has an element of pushing forward the true New World Order agenda, which is global government, technocratic panopticon, management of humans, eliminating a large portion of humans as well. So here's my takeaway, and here's what I'd like to convey to you guys. I should have mentioned this earlier too, but it was just announced today that the EU is going to be rolling out this biometric digital ID requirement in order to come in and out of the area. I was going to say the country. It's funny, because I remember back when there was no EU. Regardless, it's up to us to choose how we interpret all of this, okay? So there's a lot of folks that are focusing almost entirely on it's co-opted, it's part of an effort to co-opt the freedom movement into the Trump camp, and everybody's got this hidden agenda, and it's all part of a hidden conspiracy, and blah, 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 right? So that's one element, and again, that's not necessarily wrong. But also at the same time, there's a lot of good, a lot of calls for justice, emphasis on free speech, new technologies being introduced that are beneficial, and a shift in consciousness of a large body of people that in large part was mostly just conservative, go along to get along. But because of recent historical events, COVID especially, the pendulum has shifted. There's an awakening and awareness taking place. And that's what I want to focus on, because I'm a forever optimist, but also pragmatist. But I see that there's a lot of opportunity in people that are starting to see through the nonsense. And, okay, so here's to go full statist. I'm not voting for anybody in the election. I haven't voted in, I don't know, 15, 20 years. Maybe 15 years. So there's two factions, and both of them are represented by the current political candidates for presidency in the U.S. Jeez, it's really windy. We got this homestead here, and trying to take refuge in the creek that runs through it. So Kamala, deep state, Trumpian, Vance, Peter Thiel, Bilderberg. Bilderberg's infected both campaigns and both camps. I do believe that the efforts, the advancement of the New World Order technocracy infrastructure, EU-style authoritarianism, Orwellian censorship, wokeism, getting arrested for free speech type deal will be advanced if Kamala and the Dems and the deep state crew are in power. If Trump is, there's another problem as well, that a lot of people that are all active and paying attention now will go back to sleep and rest on their laurels. So here's the point, okay? And again, what you focus on largely creates your reality. And so I'm choosing to focus on the beauty and the wonder and seeing all this amazing messages coming out about beauty and freedom. And even JC, Jesus Christ, is having a little resurgence in a lot of these figures like Russell Brand, for example. Okay, so the message and the takeaway and the solutions aspect is there's a deep state. There's this Trumpian that has a lot of Israel. Everybody just kowtows to Israel at the end of the day. But there's also authoritarianism, pushing forward surveillance stuff, biometric border crossing, another digital ID for the US being pushed by Trump. There's like, it's called pressure from above, pressure from below. It's a communist tactic to like shift and force a policy by taking it from the elites pushing forward and then grassroots movements pushing forward. I do think it'll come about slower under Trump, unless it goes hardcore right-wing, like hardcore fascist style crackdown on political enemies and what they see as subversive movements. I don't know exactly what's going to pan out. But either way, here's the deal. We don't know what's going to pan out. We don't have control over those people or those movements. We do have our own little movement of voluntarist, exit and builder, radical, truth or freedom people that get it, right? So what we need to do is not rely on politicians or other figures in order to advance the agenda of true freedom, but rather take responsibility for ourselves, recognizing that regardless of which party ends up in power, the shadow government that's pushing technocracy, as evidenced by the Great Reset, Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, of which digital ID is one of them, that agenda is so cunning and smart and wise that it pushes forward and manages to maintain leverage and relevance and political power and influence regardless of the political party and power, in large part because they have non-governmental organizations, because they have commitments from nation states and from cities, skipping the United States government, for example. No need to sign a treaty when you have cities join the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. That was a piece of Agenda 21. They have large corporations, big tech, Disney, pushing woke nonsense. That's all always advancing, okay? And that is what I believe to be the biggest enemy of our freedoms. Smart city, panopticon, digital ID, surveillance grid, social credit score, vaccine passport, which is about controlling your freedom of movement, locking you out of the ability to exit a city, the ability to exit a country. So what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? First, let's not get cynical, jaded. Let's also not push people away that are on their own journey of awakening, as we all were at one point. The yucky, nasty, cynical tone, I think, is like not even going to bring people around as effectively as being like, hey, I understand where you're at. That's great, and yeah, freedom, and there's some great American values that we're seeing as a resurgence. Let me share a perspective on what some things that you should be aware of as well. Anyway, the exit and build thing. I mean, what we're doing with Live Free Academy, the Freedom Cell Network, the Greater Reset, People's Reset Movement, Derek Brose's work, a bunch of other folks that are focused on this type of stuff as well. I just noticed this little anklet or whatever. Oh my God, Scott El Virgen de Guadalupe. Oh, there's JC. Oh my goodness, cool. I think it's a sign. Who put this here? Tanya did, this woman that used to live with us. This was her little fairy zone. You can still see there's like sparkle stuff on these vines. You would come hang on these vines and relax down here. But as I was saying, that's why I've identified these two focus areas for action that I believe to be of the utmost importance. There's other areas that are important, of course, but these are the two that I believe will most effectively enable us to insulate ourselves, our families, our communities, future generations from the control grid that is being erected all around us at this very moment and is accelerating at breakneck speed through Agenda 2030, through 2030. The EU digital ID is just the latest piece of the puzzle. It will advance nonetheless with Vance, Trump, or Kamala here in the US. So the two areas are land and community and building the counter economy or parallel economy, okay? after seeing the digital ID thing, it's like, that's what's going to happen everywhere. And again, a lot of conservatives are being misled if they believe that that's a deep state thing, EU leftist deal, because Trump's talking about this biometric border pass for visas, but it all, you know, you just give it a footing and then it expands, the slippery slope, mission creep. So land and community, you got to get out of the city. That's where this great reset tech is going to be most implemented and advanced. Surveillance, 15-minute cities, locking down a city with carbon emissions, ratings, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense, ridiculousness. You're going to have much more freedom. You're going to be protected from the weird wokeness, riots, authoritarian, old school style policing in the country, but not just, and that has to do with homesteading and becoming self-sufficient and more independent and more having greater food sovereignty, connecting with local food producers, buying your meat from the local cattle rancher, going to the farmer's market, participating in a community-supported agriculture program, growing your own food in a garden, starting your own community-supported agriculture program, being the rancher that people buy from, connecting all these folks in our own parallel economy, which I'll talk about in a sec, but also community. We need to be living on the same properties, or at least in close proximity to one another in the country, in the rural areas where we can experience greater freedom. What our vision is, and what I've identified as my definite purpose, is to help create self-governance for our freedom community by creating within our own little camp here, our own team, but then also supporting others like Derek Brose is doing it in Mexico, Jonathan England in Costa Rica, our good friends River and Amani in Tennessee, and there's more and more people as part of this exit and build movement that's growing. And the exit and build thing expands beyond just exiting the city, buying land, building a community. Exit and build is the overall strategy of all the stuff that I'm talking about here. But I want to help to populate these intentional communities and then integrate them all together, trade networks, common like ways for solving disputes, and it can all be decentralized. It doesn't have to be like one rule set for everybody, but a lot of people are looking for direction, and somebody's going to have to figure it out, and we can all learn from one another and advance perhaps some kind of default organizational structure, decision-making apparatus, justice, conflict resolution mechanism, but trade amongst our communities, and eventually, after we amass enough numbers and we've effectively decoupled ourselves, we can be independent of their systems, which is where the counter economy, parallel economy piece comes in. We got to start trading amongst ourselves. We got to start hiring one another, working with one another, growing our own food, gifting it, gift economy, using alternative currencies, trading amongst ourselves, opting out of big tech, privacy tech, encryption, all that stuff. That's the counter economy piece. Those are the two focus areas that I think, regardless of what happens, Trump, Vance, Kamala, EU pushing this or that, it's really going to make a world of difference where you happen to lay your head. I've chosen to lay my head here in Bastrop, just east of Austin, about 45 minutes from Austin. We are looking for we have a 10-acre property here with 3 community members, 8 humans, eight adults. Wow, 8 adults, 5 children, 13 humans living on this 10-acre homestead. Bunch of cats, bunch of chickens, bunch of ducks, bunch of gardens, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm trying to practice what I preach here. We're going to be buying a large piece of land through a private realm fellowship, PMA, non-statutory trust that we're spinning up in the process right now. We're going to be making some big announcements about that soon, and this is a project that's been pretty monumental and taken considerable time and thought process and ups and downs, lefts and rights, ups and downs, smiles and frowns. But that's what we're doing here. The idea is like, just get out of the major cities. That's the first piece. Find yourself somewhere that isn't going to be overtaken by some monolithic New World Order smart city expanding and gobbling up the surrounding towns. Arguably, we're closer to Austin than we could be, but we want to get the property even further out in the rural areas. So that's what I'm going to encourage you guys to do. Learn to trade outside the system. Learn to have extra income that's beyond your Social Security, your retirement account, or some corporate job. Like, we got to be taking responsibility for this stuff, but also let's stay positive. Let's see the beauty and the wonder that's taking place in the world, that's taking place right now. Let's be grateful for having been born at this time in history with the privilege of participating in the animating contest of freedom and actually advancing the ball down the field by taking exit and build activities seriously and building out these alternative infrastructures so our children can be raised in them and so their children can be raised in them outside of that beast system. 2030 is right around the corner. Every day it gets closer and closer. I mean, we've been banging on this. I've been doing this for 22 years, knew about the New World Order, told people about the New World Order. COVID happened and I'm like, holy shnikes, it's the New World Order. I thought this was some far off thing. Here it is. And ever since COVID, you know, they say it's going to be a decade of massive monumental change. The Great Reset came about through the World Economic Forum, and that's just like a really clean iteration of the New World Order with this shiny veneer and marketing PR campaign. And there's so many different elements of advancing this Great Reset, New World Order, panopticon, technocracy society. And unfortunately, let me tie it back in here. Unfortunately, both political camps in the US have been, they're captured by this globalist movement. They're all embed in various ways, some moving faster towards the type of world envisioned by the Predator class, the New World Order, secret society, architects, the Great Reset. The Trump thing, there'll be a resurgence, it'll be a pushback, it'll be a pendulum swing. Who knows how deeply aware or involved he is with this, but his inner circle has in fact been infiltrated and he's allowed that to happen. There's no draining of the swamp taking place. It was like all Goldman Sachs, big pharma, swamp creatures in the first presidency. This time will be different. So I think it'll slow slightly with Trump, but it'll be this different, a little more shadowy movement plowing forward with different reasons to do so. So any of this could be advanced at breakneck speed with some massive global emergency taking place. So, but forget about what's happening out there. Just accept that this is taking place on a massive scale. The momentum, here's something I used to say, like, oh, well, you know, if there's this Trump populist movement, it could push back, because even the Q folks were like way off the mark, but they did see that there is a conspiracy. So maybe pushing back on the advancement of this Great Reset could happen with this massive populist movement. But unfortunately, a huge chunk of the populist movement will get co-opted back into, made to hate people so much that they willingly give up their rights just after 9/11. But what we can hope to do is show people, bing, 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 positively, with compassion for everyone around us that's coming at things from a different place at a different pace. We can boop, bloop, be a beacon, boop, boop, a beacon of hope. Boop, boop. Hey, everybody, there's a different way to live. There's a different way to organize. There's a different way to make decisions. There's a different way to bring humans together for the purpose of organized effort. We're trying it out over here. We got land. We got our own school educational system. We got our own people that protect and defend our community. We got our own food that's clean and of the earth. We have our own spiritual connection to the divine that's all around us. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, you can come visit us. You can check this out, read this book, watch this video. That's how we win, ladies and gentlemen. And ultimately, we don't have to win over a significant portion of the population. We just need enough of us that get it to coalesce, to operate together on through the principle of organized effort with a common definite purpose, as all Napoleon Hill stuff, with a common definite purpose of establishing these free communities and these technological infrastructures and systems that enable us to meet our common wants and needs without relying on centralized, hierarchical, coercive, governmental, or corporate institutions, and while simultaneously insulating ourselves and protecting ourselves from the encroachment of the beast system. This is my mission. If you're watching this transmission, then you have joined not the revolution, but the evolution. And it all starts within. It all starts with believing that we can make it happen. We're going to need your help. If you want to follow along what I got going, if you want to hear more about our community, about what we're doing here at Radical Roots Ranch, about how to opt out of technocracy by focusing on building land projects and communities and opting out of the big banks and the fiat currencies, then check me out, livefree.academy/newsletter. You can sign up for free, livefree.academy/newsletter, get our free daily email newsletter. And you'll also get a free video, how to hack your habits and 10x your goals. All right, guys, peace and freedom. John Bush, I'm out.